Is it just me, or does this sound familiar? A Scandinavian brand selling quartz minimalist watches which are made in the Far East and heavily marketed on social media. Feels like it's some sort of tick list for startup watch brands these days, doesn't it? Well, my main question is what separates Nordgreen from the rest? Hey guys, Ben here. They've sent me this philosopher in the 36mm size to take a look at in this video. A quick heads up, they haven't paid me any money to say anything good about this watch or their brand, and they're seeing this video at the same time as you do, so if you like reviews like that, then make sure you consider subscribing to see more on this channel. And if you want to go the extra mile, there's a link to my Patreon in the video description. Okay, so this brand really appeared on my radar late last year. I've seen them on Instagram a few times. I know they've sent these watches out to a few big influencers, and really there are a couple of factors that Nordgreen are really pushing almost as their unique selling points. Firstly, these watches are designed by Jacob Wagner, who is a well-known and highly acclaimed designer. He's worked with a bunch of really popular brands before, so we'll see how well he's done with this watch. Additionally, they've got this focus on sustainability, with recyclable packaging and partnerships with manufacturers who apparently focus on green production. I haven't researched that one in depth, you'll have to take the word on it. This is combined with a giving back program where for each watch purchased, they'll donate to one of 3 charity organizations, either providing education to a child in India, clean water to someone in the Central African Republic, or preserving 200 feet of rainforest in Latin America. That all sounds great, but you're here for the watch, how is it? This smaller 36mm model is actually slightly under that, but fits really nicely on my wrist. Coming in at just 7.4mm in depth, it's a pretty slim watch too. What surprised me is how tight the lugs are, especially when I saw the photos before. I really didn't realise the lug-to-lug size is actually smaller than the diameter of the watch, which is the first time I've ever seen that outside of lug-free designs. Considering this, the watch definitely wears smaller than the size indicates. It's a bit of a pecker, as we'd say here in Stoke. They do make a 40mm version too, and I'd say, considering the tiny lugs on these, that's probably going to be the best size for most people. Though it's nice that they've got this one for skinny-wristed people to go for. In terms of materials, it seems they've also followed the mystery checklist for this. You've got the familiar 316L stainless steel construction, a Japanese quartz movement, mineral glass, 3 ATM of water resistance, and a genuine leather strap. No real surprises there, but we'll talk about that later. When you look at the design, I'd say it's pretty standard Scandinavian, though it's definitely not as generic as lots of the fashion brands I've seen out there. This philosopher model features a raised and texturized chapter ring containing the slim second and hour markers. You do have to look very close to see that texture, but it is there. You'll also notice the second hand is quite unusual to say the least. This slims down into an asymmetrical knife shape, which is supposed to have some metaphorical meaning. I guess it's quite refreshing to see something different, though I can't say I'm a fan of it. One thing I am a fan of is the case. It features a brushed finish for the most part with a thin, high polished bezel around the circumference. The lugs sprout from underneath the watch, jutting out at a pleasing angle, which kind of makes the watch sit nicely on surfaces. You'd think, given the small size of the watch and these coming out from the center, that this would dig into your wrist, but surprisingly, I'm glad to say it doesn't. Actually, the watch is very comfortable on wrist and you'll be able to wear this for ages without feeling it. You'll also notice the crown is slightly different from a lot of watches. This one only has the deep knurling towards the very tip, but still retains a sufficient amount of grip, which surprised me. Maybe the brushed finish on it adds some mechanical grip to it too, I'm not sure. Unfortunately, the snap-on case back really doesn't provide much water resistance. So I wouldn't dream of showering or swimming in this, but to be honest, given the style of the watch, I doubt you'd want to be doing that anyway. And as such, it's definitely not a deal breaker. Aesthetically, I think as a whole this watch looks pretty good. There's definitely more going on here than some of its Scandinavian contemporaries. It's minimalist but doesn't look stale, there are some nicer finishing touches and it doesn't look like it's just been lobbed together in 5 minutes. There's something about the proportions, at least of this 36mm model. Nothing looks like it's been forced or stretched out like some of the lugs I've seen on many of these fashion watches. This just sits together nice and neatly, which I like. It feels like not much was really an afterthought, except for maybe the specifications, which we'll definitely talk about. Because unfortunately, there's nothing special really inside the watch. This is just a cheap Miyota quartz movement, as used in loads of brands around this price point. This is fine and I guess accurate enough, but it's just not a clear positive in my opinion. you can easily get watches that have got these movements in for a third of the price of this one. And you can buy the movements individually for dirt cheap online, a couple of pounds. Fortunately, the strap is pretty good though. This one is only genuine leather but feels plush, and I'm confident will actually last well over time. It's a nice colour and is flexible enough without feeling cheap. It also features the quick release tabs at the top to allow speedy strap changes on the fly, which is a nice feature. This really reminds me of the linear straps, which I'll be featuring at some point in an upcoming video. In terms of the styling and the actual feel of them, very comparable. So overall, I'm glad they haven't skimped here on a terrible strap that loads of brands do. Do I love this watch? No. Do I think this is just another Daniel Wellington clone? I'd also say no. I'm under no doubt that the massive success of these fashion brands like Daniel Wellington did inspire the inception of brands like this. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at them and thought, you know what, we can do something similar but a little bit better and make loads of money. And overall in this case, I do think the watch is alright. My main reservation with it is just the price. The watch regularly retails for £164, which I think is a lot considering the specifications. They almost always have some sort of discount code on the go, and they sent me on email a 35% off discount code that you can use until 2nd of December. I'll pop that on the screen and a description they wanted me to include in the video. That would take it down to a more respectable amount of £106. And personally, I wouldn't really want to be spending much more than that on this watch. I'd like to see that £100 as the standard retail price, to be honest. While the watch looks good and feels alright, you can get similar watches with very similar specifications for less elsewhere. I get that they have this sustainability thing and this really good designer, but the watches are made in Hong Kong, and I anticipate that the markups on these are pretty high. Nevertheless, I do think it's better than Daniel Wellington. I think the watch looks better, it certainly feels better when you got it in your hands, and when they're side by side, you can tell more effort has definitely gone into this one. However, for me, it just lacks a killer feature that would make this a really unique value proposition. Like, you got other watches around this sort of price point that have either got like sapphire glass or an automatic movement or something a bit different. There's a little bit too much on this that's the same as some of the other watches out there, in my opinion.